So, Max, that's it? Is it over? What's going to happen?
Yeah, it's not looking great for Commonwealth Games, and costs proved prohibitive there, but they do all over the shop in terms of international sporting events. The Summer Olympics costs have recently ballooned. Since 2004 in Sydney, the minimum cost for an Olympic Summer Games has been $13 billion, and the highest has been $55 billion. That record was set by the Sochi Winter Olympics in 2014, closely followed by the Beijing Olympics, a similar sum there. And World Cups are going the same way, even further. Qatar, the Men's World Cup hosts of last year, spent $220 billion. So these are massive, massive sums, and also it's proving not to be a good business deal. Lots of countries coming away for the worse. I mean, the record loss for the Olympics was the Rio Games in 2016 at $2 billion they lost after having hosted a World Cup prior. So the venues were already there. A lot of the costs were already taken care of ahead of time, and still they lost money. And a lot of people in the population, the general population and politicians realising that investing this amount of money in infrastructure, venues and operating costs is just simply not a good deal.
So who's still interested in hosting these sorts of events? Countries that want to sport wash their human rights reputation, or nations that just have too much money to throw around?
Well, very much those types of nations, but actually Australia are about to host the Women's World Cup in just 2 days' time, and the Brisbane Olympics in 2032. So it's a mixed bag still. Before that, Paris and Los Angeles will be hosting the Olympics, but soft power has always played a massive role in these sorts of events, and sports washing is now as well. Saudi Arabia is one of the countries like Qatar who have ramped up their investment in sports and sporting events. They're vying for all sorts of events like hosting the Asian Winter Games in Saudi Arabia, believe it or not. And there's a growing trend for autocratic states where the population isn't consulted to take on these hosting jobs, because when you do ask citizens, they tend to say no, like was the case with Munich, Hamburg and Garmisch in Germany, where polls showed that people just didn't want to host Olympic Games. And the legacy is not always positive. There are massive costs, questions around sustainability in an age of climate change. So the prestige is fading, and corruption in both the IOC and FIFA also doesn't help.
Yeah, the environmental factor, especially when you're talking about hosting a winter event in such a hot country. What is the future then of these major international events?
Well, I think this may spell the end of something like the Commonwealth Games, which has just struggled to find hosts for a long time. But outside of that, looking at big things like the Olympics and World Cup, multi-city and multi-nation events are the way forward. The Men's World Cup in 2026 is being hosted by Canada, USA and Mexico. The Women's World Cup just now by 2 countries as well, Australia and New Zealand sharing there. And you look at the Olympics, multi-city events there, where, you know, Guadalajara, Mexico City, Monterrey and Tijuana will host together as Mexico aims to have an Olympic bid go forward in 2036. And the upcoming World Cups from 2030 onwards all have a minimum of 3 countries vying for shared hosting jobs. Okay. So this seems to be the way forward, but it's not getting easier to convince people to host these sort of events.
It's also tricky, I guess, with spectators having to travel to all those different countries if they want to go to various events. But Max Merrill, thank you very much for coming in and bringing us the latest on that.